Hi, my name is Carol.
My name is Hasna, and we are Current Harmony Connections.
Current Harmony Connections is an online community organization that aims to raise awareness to the challenges we currently face in society, helping educate people so they can make a positive impact in their communities.
Speaking Volumes is our first panel discussion and interview event, and our topics are Asian empowerment, Muslim empowerment, Black empowerment, women empowerment, navigating COVID, and mental health.
Be sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up to our videos.
Please follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links will be in the description box below.
We hope you enjoy our panel discussions and interviews.
Without further ado, we'll get started. I'd like to thank all of you for coming and helping me showcase Asian empowerment, especially with things going on because of the pandemic, the xenophobia happening against Asians. I really wanted to tackle this issue, so I wanted to showcase Asian empowerment with the project that we were doing. So first, we would like each of you to introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do. Make sure also to say your name. So we can start with Sam.
Sure. My name is Sam Hyun. I am currently serving as one of the Asian American commissioners for the Massachusetts Asian American Commission. I also serve as the executive director of the Korean American Citizens League, podcast host for I Am Not a Virus, social media host for Hate is a Virus. I also do a lot of public speaking such as this, and I'm a graduate student pursuing my master's in public policy at the Heller School of Social Management Policy.
Alex.
Cool. My name is Alex Chang, and I am the founder and president of Ivy Way Academy. And our job is to supposedly help students do well on test prep and get into colleges. But I think what's more important than those two things are doing well academically. So it's not about beating a test, but having solid academic preparation for college, and also self-development over the specific colleges that students get into. And so I've been doing this in mostly Taiwan and China, and that's where I am currently in right now too.
Kiki.
Hi, my name is Kiki Wong. Kyla and I are both co-founders of the company Nylon Pink LLC. We also do a lot of digital marketing and social media, and we work with a group of influencers of over 15,000 on Facebook, and we do just a lot of social media presence. And we also used to play in a band. It was an all-Asian American girl band, and we toured the world in that for about 8 years. So,
Kyla.
Hi, I'm Kyla. Everything Kiki said, Kyla Yu, and also I handle PR and marketing for different lifestyle brands, and am a travel writer and expert.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, especially with all of your experience and different perspectives. I'd like you to tell us about your point of view, especially what's going on right now. So our first question is, as an Asian leader or a professional, what are some of your greatest accomplishments? And we can go with Kiki first.
My greatest accomplishments are probably non-conventional. We actually got to tour a bunch as a musician, which is a completely non-conventional lifestyle as Asian Americans or Asians in general. I was going to school to be a medical student and, the good child. And I ended up quitting my job at UCLA Med Center to tour with the band Nylon Pink. And first it was rough, and then we ended up touring across the world in Hong Kong, Malaysia, Macau, South America, Europe, everywhere. So Ohio mostly, a lot of Ohio, which is, at first we did a ton of Ohio. But, and then, ultimately Kyla and I, we set the guitars down and microphones, and we started a blog which was supposed to express our travels and our interests and what we discovered in the band. And later we created a community essentially through media, and here we are. We travel the world also doing travel writing, and wrote a book together, which was really cool. It's called the 30-Day Travel Challenge. So it was really fun so far.
What about you, Alex?
So I've been with my startup, I guess no longer startup since it's about 10, 11 years now. With my company, like I said earlier, I've been trying to make students focus more on the hard and soft skills that they have. And I think especially with Asian parents and Asian culture, a lot of I think mostly parents have a strong focus on getting a good education. And to them, a good education means getting to top colleges like I don't know, Harvard, Stanford, MIT. And so what I've been trying to do unconventionally, especially in Asia, is to promote this self-development or self-improvement where we try to make them focus more on just being like a solid candidate for whichever future goals that they want to go into. So that could be in music and art. It could be traditional tracks like being a lawyer or a doctor, but just anything that students really enjoy being in their future. So that's what we've been trying to do with our company. I think secondly, and it was an accident, is that as I'm doing this in Asia, I got invited to do a TEDx talk about college life. And I think they invited me to talk about how good Harvard is, but I'm talking about how challenging a like high octane environment like Harvard can be for students, and also talk about mental health. And I think based on the comments below the video, it seemed like my story resonated with a lot of people about the pressure that they have. And from the message that I got from a lot of people, I feel like maybe I accomplished a little bit in terms of speaking about mental health and I guess, not putting too much pressure on yourself. So yeah, that's something that happened recently. I was really excited about that.
What about you, Sam?
Yeah, I think coming back and really embracing my Asian American heritage. And I think for most of my life, I ran away from it and I rejected it. And I think really immersing myself in the community now and speaking out for our community, having worked in politics. And I was the only Asian American that was at the level of office that I was at. And kind of looking back and like reflecting, like, what kind of impact did I really have, and showing people that this is a way for them and how do you speak up. And so I would say, honestly, most recently, probably speaking out about the anti-Blackness in the Asian American community. And I ended up on the front page of the Boston Globe for it because obviously it's not something that people talk about. And I never thought I'd find myself on TikTok, but like I'm on TikTok with a decent amount of followers. And a lot of the stuff I talk about is stuff that people say, well, I've never heard Asians talk about that before. I'm like, we do, you just don't listen to us. And so I think that's why I think this empowerment panel is so important, because we're here showing people that Asian Americans have always spoken up. The difference is whether or not you choose to hear us and see us and value us as part of the community, as opposed to the stereotypes that have always existed because of model minority men.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly why we wanted to showcase this Asian empowerment panel, especially with what's going on. But, like our mission is to show that everybody should be treated equally regardless of race or religion or sexuality. So we'd really like to showcase that. And what about you, Kyla?
Hi, so I think some of my accomplishments that resonated with me personally was that we're amongst the first wave of Asian Americans to pursue music in the United States back when it was very, very rare. And now it's exciting to see that it's very common, and I think Asians still haven't broken through, Asian Americans, K-pop perhaps, but Asian American to mainstream music, hopefully we'll see it in this generation. I also recently became certified to speak with Journey Out on the issue of human trafficking. And I too have fallen into the TikTok trap, and my channel kind of focuses on feminism.
These are all great contributions. Just so you know, I just want to know that what you're doing, it makes a big impact. So what would you say has been your biggest obstacle in your career or life as an Asian? We can go with Alex first.
I think part of the college admission process is that colleges assess students holistically. And as a result, there were a lot of lawsuits against Harvard recently, but most recently against Yale, about how colleges are discriminating against Asians. And so I think that's an obstacle and challenge for the Asian students for being quote unquote smarter and better academically, is that it's maybe more difficult for Asians to get into a top college than other races. But on, I think from the college's perspective, they do want a more diverse college campus. And from being in Asia, I also see a lot of the Asians don't have a good personality, as in they might be more introverted, more wanting to stick with the Asian crowd than like really getting to know the American crowd, even if it's Asian American. And maybe their inability to really express themselves and speak up for themselves. So that's something that we're trying to do with these Asian students as we're helping them with high school and getting to colleges. Also let them know that personality is an important aspect for, I guess, for what they care about for getting into colleges, but on a bigger picture for like their future life in maybe America, but really anywhere, to be able to empower themselves and speak up for themselves. I think that's pretty important.
What about you, Kyla?
I don't know if I, necessarily experienced traditional racism just being Asian American here in California, where there's so much Asian culture, but I kind of experienced like kind of a reverse racism. I think in high school, trying to find my own identity, I was hanging around with a more diverse crowd, but then I started to only hang around Asians just to kind of find pride in my culture. So I, in that circle, was racist against everybody else who was not Asian. We only liked to do things that were, listen to Asian music, etc. So I think kind of my journey is more being integrating into the regular American culture and being accepting of all different cultures.
What about you, Sam?
Yeah, I kind of like to, I kind of want to change the question a little bit, and it's like, what is like prohibiting us, as being Asian? But it's more of like, we put these in boxes, and it's like, only identify as Asian American. We're so much more than that racial identity. And so I think part of what actually inhibits us from being able to build solidarity is that those in Asian American communities, like we still are still in the kind of teenage stage in the US history of developing our identity. So we never really built that solidarity among Asian American communities. It's really mostly among the ethnic groups. And because we don't have that solidarity, and part of that having to do with we don't share a common language, and our struggles are also slightly different, although there are definitely some intersectional parts of it. I think that for us, it's that we have to do a better job of trying to understand each other. And that's understanding our geopolitical differences. That's understanding some of our cultural differences. That's understanding the fact that while we're, when you think about identity, you want to think about it from a sense of pride, but also that means that we have to also understand the negative components of it. For instance, we're very much patriarchal, and we still very much, do things that the Western world finds backwards. And so because we have a lot of contrasting ideas and beliefs, it does make it harder to integrate and to break through the bamboo ceiling, so to speak. There's part and due to the fact that the model minority myth exists, and that creates a bamboo ceiling. If you look at statistics, like less than 1% of Asian of those that are CEOs or in positions of power are Asian American. But at the same time, there's a sense of, hard look in the mirror that Asian Americans also have to do as well. So I would say to answer the question, it isn't fully answering your question, but I think part of it is multifaceted, it is multidimensional, and we try to look at it from such a black and white point of view when there's so much more nuance to it.
What about you, Kiki?
I think for the struggles that I face as an Asian American doing sort of like a non-conventional job is, trying to maintain face, like a big portion of being Asian American is maintaining your, your, like where you are, your hierarchy or whatever. And most of the time I was on a good track and I just canceled everything. So I think that was a really difficult time, sort of losing that face, losing that position in the Asian community. So playing music was really, really difficult. Simultaneously, Kyla and we played rock music. So it was like K-pop, rock kind of stuff, but our demographic was in America, of our audience. So at the same time, some of our audience didn't really understand who we were either. Like when we were touring in the Midwest, people are like, oh, what is this? Like, are you guys from Japan and stuff like that? So I think finding a group of people that I could connect with has been a difficult thing my entire life. I grew up in a 90% white community, so I didn't feel as connected. I don't speak my native tongues. So it's been more of a struggle trying to figure out where I belong, because I'm kind of like just overtly too white for Asian, too Asian for white. So I think that was a big struggle in our career, but we just persevered and continued to do what we love and got to where we are today, I guess. So
I agree with what you said, that it's hard to pursue a career, especially in music, since I also want to major in music. And Asian culture, they don't really look at that as something like up there. Yeah. I mean, unless like you get famous, but I've had people telling me that you shouldn't do that and that's not good for you, stuff like that. So the only people who have supported me are my parents. So luckily, they're
awesome.
there.
That's good.
So what are some common stereotypes that people have pinned on you because of your race, and how did you make them see different? We can start with Kyla first.
I feel like the stereotypes that I've gotten from people have been really generally positive because of the model minority myth, being smart, dependable, good family. I feel like the stereotypes that I haven't appreciated so much have come from the Asian culture itself. As Kiki mentioned, needing to, like my mom says, have a job with a 401k and like retirement benefits and things like that. Having to have a traditional family of marriage and children, kind of things that I don't want. And I've just always felt so much like a, what is the black sheep, because everything I want is so traditionally different from what falls under Asian culture of what's like accepted and correct. So that's kind of just finding my way in the Asian American society at large by being different, trying to find my own place.
What about you, Sam?
I would say I definitely want to echo a lot of what Kyla said. I definitely think that some of our own negative stereotypes definitely inhibit us from being ourselves and fully grasping that. But also, I think I would say also, as well as the negative, the model minority myth also plays against you, right? So, I played baseball through college, so I actually know quite a bit of Ohio because I went to Allegheny College, so I traveled all throughout Western Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I think oftentimes people, why do you play baseball? It's a white man's sport, or I always had to exceed their expectations, not meet their expectations, because I was doing something unconventional. When I was in politics, it was, having to deal with the microaggressions, even though I'm in Massachusetts and I'm working for probably the most powerful man in Massachusetts political history. Even still, like, I had to deal with a lot of microaggressions. And for me, it was coming to understand and accept who I was and having that conviction in my own identity And I think that part of it is like the model minority myth of that we are do slightly better than other people of color, that we are given a slightly more opportunity, that we're the way I describe being Asian American is we get to, we're allowed into the room. Sometimes we get to see the table. Maybe we get to raise our hand. But other than that, that's the extent of it. And there's only room for one of us. So because of that, we do have a slight advantage. And because of that, we do sometimes will lean into it. But that also means that we have to have more, continue to uplift one another and understand that there shouldn't just be one of us. We shouldn't be fighting for that one seat, but we should be making sure that all of us have a seat at the table and making sure that we have conviction in who we are. Look, I'm Asian American. I'm damn fucking proud of it, right? And that is who I am. But that takes nothing away from me being American and the fact that, the rest of American society does look at us as the perpetual foreigner. So it's always Asian American. I'm never told that I'm American, even though I was born here. And so I feel like I keep on going away from your question a little bit, but I think definitely, having conviction in who I am.
I mean, no, those are all good points. Yeah, it's definitely something what you said. And I don't think that you went away from the question, because those are important things that people really need to hear to gain confidence, especially as an Asian and in this time right now. So what about you, Kiki?
I think it's difficult because being Asian and sort of like a pretty white, predominantly, well, just growing up in a white community, I felt really disconnected from my Asian community. And that always was like a struggle of trying to catch up wherever I was, whether I was trying to catch up in the white community or trying to catch up in the Asian community. And also simultaneously being in the music scene, there's really little to no Asians at all. I mean, we were lucky to have our group of, our actual band in Nylon Pink before it turned into the business. But, and that was actually the first time I ever had an Asian community, a group of like I felt like I was connected with an Asian group, which was basically when I was in my 20s. There's like a one time, which I don't remember, but my mom tells me that I was like 8 years old and grew up in a small town, like about 12,000 people, predominantly Caucasian. And I was like washing my face in the middle of the day. And my mom was like, "Why are you washing your face?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm trying to wash the brown away." And I didn't understand, kids perpetually were making fun of me, and they didn't understand either. But you grow up getting so used to it that you think in your mindset at such a young age, you're like adapt or die. So I ended up accepting the fact that people are making fun of me, and that was my norm. That was my complete norm. I didn't know it was wrong. I just thought that was how you lived life. Until I came to UC Irvine and went to school to UC Irvine, and it's like 60% Asian, and I was very confused. I was like, "What world is this?" And even then, I still couldn't really fit in with them because I was too white. So I think perpetually kind of trying to find myself in these, these groups socially has been difficult. As a career, it's also been difficult. I played in a punk rock band, I was put together by the Misfits, which is a punk rock band, and we toured across the US. We did a little bit of Europe, and that was really tough too, being the only Asian girl. I mean, not being a girl first, and then being an Asian girl, and in a punk rock scene, and you see a lot of like really gnarly stuff happening, and it kind of brought me back to my childhood, and I was like, I just have to put that armor on and take it. But I think that mentality is sort of distorted, because as Asian Americans as a whole, we are constantly kind of taking it and just being quiet and dealing with these things, whereas other groups may speak out more. So I think ultimately in the end, to solve the problem, it would be to build a community, whether it's online or wherever you are, and know that it's okay to actually speak out, and it's healthy and good for you. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we hope to do with CHC. We want to speak out for everybody. So what about you, Alex?
So I think my story will be a little bit different from yours because you guys are, I think, born and raised in the States, right? I was born in Taiwan and moved to the States for middle school and stayed there for quite a while. Um, and when I first tried to have classes in Taiwan, parents would always ask me or ask to see if we have foreign teachers. And then like I have to clarify with them, like, what do you mean by foreign? Like, am I foreign enough? Or maybe if I speak English to them and they'll say, oh, your English is pretty good. And I'll just say, oh, like, I've lived in the States for most of my life. So like, you should comment on my Chinese and not my English. Like to them, maybe foreign teachers mean someone who looks white. And that is the market in Asia too, that if you look white and it has to be white, you get paid more for a teaching job than many other jobs. But like if I look Asian, then I'll automatically get a lower pay because of my looks. So, and I think that's difficult to overcome in Asia for teaching, because some parents are really just looking for a foreign-looking person to like talk to kids and have kids feel comfortable interacting with a non-Asian-looking person. But if we're not talking about the kids who are just trying to like get to talk to a foreign person, then I'll tell them about how like maybe my experience relate to their experience more from being Asian and having similar backgrounds. So I think I have a better way to teach them through my experience. Yeah, so like try to have them see who I am inside and not just how I look like. And sometimes maybe to avoid that, I might do like a teleconference with them first, and then I'll like turn on my camera and say, oh, you're like Asian. I was like, yeah. But then once they see the like what we are capable of, I think that the rest aren't too difficult. But they are culture issues that I don't think can be solved in a short time.
I mean, I've watched this experiment where like there's positive stereotypes that people pin on you because of your race. But even though it seems positive, they put you in this sort of box that it makes it hard to break out of. So you have to often exceed their expectations. And that's also really difficult too, but many people don't really see that because they often think that the Asian race is smarter or better, but we have to often exceed their expectations of what they think because we don't get equal opportunities. So because they don't want to show that them as better than anybody else. So why do people immediately associate COVID with Asians, and how can we resolve this issue? We could go with Alex first.
Difficult question. Well, why the association? Because it originated in China, I think, or it seems like it originated from China. So that association is embedded in people's mind, and that's not going to go away. But I also think there are a lot of political reasons behind why Asians are being targeted because of COVID, because of the politics between China and US, and also because of how China responded to the pandemic that may have done bad things to the world. Can't say too much since I'm using the internet from China. But how to resolve the issue? I guess it's important for people to know that what a government does doesn't necessarily speak for the entire race. Like I'm definitely for transparency. I think transparency is good. And I think honesty is generally good. And so I wouldn't say that certain people's actions really speak for my actions just because we're the same race. So I think if people can understand that, that it's not really my fault for COVID to be spreading around the world, then maybe they should accept Asians a little bit more. But can't say too much.
What about you, Kiki?
Oh man, it's actually interesting. it's hard for me to know because I feel that I missed out a lot on understanding my Asian culture. My uncle, he's actually a professor at, or was a retired professor at TSU for Asian American Studies. So I reached out to him when the very beginning of COVID happened and the racism was really strong against Asians. So I asked for his opinion, and of course, he's a professor, so he gave me a huge article, which was actually fascinating. And I was curious too, because simultaneously then there was the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was like, where do we stand? Where are we supposed to be when 3 months, actually it's really interesting because I play a lot of metal music on my TikTok and my account. I get a lot of interesting inbox messages, and they're mostly from a very specific type of person. It's weird, but it's like a 65-year-old white male. It's weird, I'm just gonna say it, but they have Asian wives, and I got a really interesting message that he had said, why are you supporting the Black Lives Matter movement when just 3 months ago, Black people were discriminating against Asians because of COVID? And I thought that was such a really backwards and bizarre message to receive. And it wasn't just him, it was several people saying stuff like that, of that type of person. And I just thought, this is more than just a race issue. It's a political situation. People have their own motives. People also getting antsy because they're on quarantine. But I think ultimately, if we stand more for race issue as a whole, I think that's going to help people understand about Asians and COVID. I think that if we speak out more and support our other races as well as ourselves, it's kind of hard if you speak too much about, well, that may not be true, but I think this might be the Asian in me, trying to be the wallflower. But I think if you help support racism as an issue as a whole, it will help people understand about COVID. But yes, that's my opinion.
What about you, Kyla?
Well, I think that people immediately associate COVID with Asians because we have a president who's associating it with Asians, first of all. And how to resolve it's not an easy issue, obviously. I think a lot of it, I was really shocked when I started to see all the racist attacks against Asians. And then at first I was assuming, oh, that's just happening in the Midwest or whatever. But then seeing that it's happening in New York and in California was really shocking to me. Just made me realize that there was an underlying racism that is just being allowed to be expressed these days. People feel like they have the freedom to express what they've probably always thought, and what I didn't realize that they thought. And I think a lot of it, because at first I was like, how dare they? Asians are superior, they're the best. But then I had to look at kind of my own internal biases and maybe my own, we all naturally have biases and judgments and prejudices. And I think how to resolve the issue is first to look internally within yourself, where are your biases? And then maybe if it's possible, speaking to and trying to understand those who are discriminating against us instead of immediately becoming angered, trying to understand why they have these points of view. I think just having an understanding of your own biases and of other people, that's the first step to seeing how we could possibly resolve this really multifaceted issue.
I agree with you, Kyla. It was definitely shocking since I also live in California, which is majority Asian population, that something like this was happening. I didn't even know it was happening until my friends told me that what they were going through. And I mean, even if I might not be going through it, since I'm also Muslim, I often go through discrimination. And to see them go through something like that, especially when you're the majority, it was really heartbreaking for me. Yeah, and I feel like also what you said was right, that maybe they always had those like misconceptions, or they always had that anger towards you, and they've found a way to channel it towards you using the news of COVID. So what about you, Sam?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, actually. So this is what I spend a lot of my time doing, particularly as an Asian American commissioner. I think it comes down to representation, representation, representation. We do not have representation. We have to continue to speak up. We have to continue to work across the aisle. We have to continue to build bridges, and so I think part of that goes down to our relationship with the Black community. And the fact of the matter is that we have a very strained relationship with the Black community now, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think that that's where it gets really multifaceted. And for example, I'll just speak about the Korean American community, especially after '92 with the LA riots. There was a reason why the Black community actually, turned around. First of all, they're blockaded from going into Beverly Hills, right, by the cops. The police literally prevented the riots from actually going into Beverly Hills. So the next community right over was the Korean American community. Granted, there's also a lot of miscommunication there, that it wasn't the Black community that was doing most of the looting. It was actually the Latino, Latinx community. But the narrative has been told that it's been the Black community. Furthermore, I think that there's just a lot of misunderstanding between the Asian community and the Black community. There's a lot of miscommunication between the Latino, Latinx community and the Asian community. And that's what I mean. I think a lot of the issues that come down to what is happening with the racism, bigotry, xenophobia comes down to misunderstanding that is stemming from miscommunication. And that is a lot to do with the fact that we're still very much in survival mode. A lot of our parents, they come over here as immigrants. And their mindset is, I need to keep a roof over my children's head. I need to put food on the table. And it's not that they don't have the bandwidth or the capacity or the intellectual or the empathy to actually be able to understand race and racism. But when they come over to this country, they don't understand what Asian American is. They don't understand what racism is. They don't understand Black history. They don't understand American history. They don't know any of these things. And so we're not taught those things in our household growing up, because those are all Western Americanized ideas, not one that was implanted into our parents. And so the second generation that you're seeing, this younger one that's coming up right now, we grew up as Asian American. We grew up understanding what racism is. We grew up understanding these concepts, but because our parents haven't, and then there goes into that complicated dynamic of teaching, right? Teaching your parents. And if you're an adult, any adult will say this, nobody likes to have someone younger than them teach them. It's just our, inherent, like naturally, we're just like, who the hell are you, especially when it's our children. And so I think that it's not having the language yet to be able to express these, have these conversations with our parents. And what I've seen about having a lot of conversations around race with the older generation, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't have empathy. It's not that they, no one's born racist, but I realized that some of the older folks in the Korean community, they were like, I just don't have the language. I don't know how to say it on Facebook. I don't speak English well enough. And then I remember, I watched the 13th with my mom, and she's just crying because there's all this Black history that she just didn't know about. And then what I found out that her and her church group and there are a bunch of 60, women in their 60s, for 4 hours was talking about Black Lives Matter and talking about all the things that they didn't know about, all the misconceptions about Black people that they had. And they're like, we didn't know that my mom said, she's like, none of them knew that Black folks only made up 14% of the U.S. population. We thought it was like 50. And then we didn't know about mass incarceration. We didn't know about redlining. We didn't know about Jim Crow and all of these things. And so I think, again, when wrapping back around to the question about Asian Americans and COVID, it's because no one is taught Asian American history correctly here. Nobody knows about the fact that in the 1800s, Chinese migrant workers were brought here and they were lynched, that the largest mass murder mass lynching in U.S. history was of Chinese American migrant workers. Nobody knows that, and we call it Japanese internment camp, not Japanese concentration camps. Internment is when we're trying to protect a group of people, and you're hiding them for those protectional reasons, not putting them forcefully there against their will. That is a concentration camp. So because we don't know our own history, Asian Americans don't know our own history, other Americans don't know Asian American history, so that leads to a lot of misconceptions, and which has led to the reinforcement of the model minority myth, which has led to the attacks on Asian Americans. And I actually was not surprised that we were attacked. I've been telling Asian American folks that we were the next in line to be attacked. You saw Black folks, then you saw the Latinx immigrant community, you saw the Muslim community. Who's left? It's us. And that's why I kept saying, like, we have to fight back against the model minority myth. We have to break out of the misconceived notions of who we are. But that also means that we have to address the unspoken topics in our community, which is the fact that we have interrace racism, that East Asians are racist against Southeast Asians, and South Asians, that we don't include, folks who look like Hosna, as Asian American. We don't include Indian Americans as Asian American, that Indian Americans may not even identify as Asian American, but the rest of the United States does. And so there's a lot of conversation that we have not had internally, which has has, I think, contributed to the racist attacks against Asian Americans, and why it's so hard for us to actually be heard when we speak up. For instance, despite my criticisms of Andrew Yang, he still deserved a platform at the DNC, simply because he was one of the major candidates for the Democratic nominee. But the fact that he was immediately left out is a problem. The fact that, Asian American in Congress, we only have, Ted Lieu, we have Grace Meng, we have Judy Chu, we have, like, the amount of Asian Americans we have in Congress are lacking. We have yet to see an Asian American be governor. We don't see, too many mayors, or, even in school committee. We care so much about education. Where are our school committee members? We care so much about money. Where are our banking CEOs? Where are our hedge fund CEOs? And so all these that we just haven't had a conversation about, that I think we need to start having. Sorry, that was a very long answer. I took up a lot of space, but I have a lot of thoughts about this.
No, it's fine. It's something important that we should all know about. We should all definitely learn about everybody's history before we start having preconceived misconceptions about somebody else. We've only learned about American history in school, and more about England and things like that. We don't learn about the actual history besides the Chinese dynasties. Besides that, we haven't learned the actual Asian history or history of any other countries. So that's why they often have misconceptions of people. And a piece of advice that just this quote that I recently heard is, not all people think that Asians brought COVID. It's just that minority that do have the loudest voice, which attracts others towards them. And
so
we also have
down, right?
Yeah, we also have to start, speaking out, because people think that we take it and take it and take it, when, we've been raised that way, that we go ahead and take it rather than speaking out, but they think that we don't have the ability to speak up for ourselves. So it's definitely important, especially with this type of panel, to showcase Asian empowerment in this time. So the next question is, how should we, the community, tackle this issue of xenophobia that is being aimed towards Asians because of COVID? We could go with Kyla first.
I think it still goes back to connection and just like connecting with people. As I mentioned before, I grew up in a primarily white community, but I found the Asians and I just hung out with them, and we were biased against anybody else, and that did not build community amongst other cultures. So also I see that being taken with me into my travel career, where there's a bias against traveling in the States. Like doesn't count as traveling if you don't leave somewhere internationally. But there are so many different communities here in the States. And when we toured in Ohio, Illinois, in that area, I remember Kiki was terrified because she was like, oh my God, we're going to confront so much racism. And we didn't confront any. I mean, the people were really kind and welcoming. And it was actually really great getting to know people in the Midwest. I thought they were really charming. And I left with a different idea of people. Like, I don't have that bias against the Midwest that I had prior to visiting. So I think it's just important to get out there and interact with different communities and maybe travel a little bit. Maybe it's not safe to travel right now, besides COVID, but on top of that, the racism. I don't know if the climate has changed out there. But, you know, in LA, there's a million communities that you can go reach out to and just connect with different people outside of your circle.
What about you, Alex?
So I think that it comes down to, well, first it's educational, that there is a lot of education about Black history, but not enough about Asian history in America. And as a result, there is no awareness about how, I guess, races other than Black and whites belong in America. And like, I realized that maybe like online, if there is someone making a video and say the N-word about Black people, like that's a huge issue. But if someone says a C word about Asians, that is funny to some people. And like, there shouldn't be that kind of different stereotype where it's like okay to make fun of certain races. And I think part of that is because maybe historically Asians don't speak up as often and as much as what maybe like other races do. So like echoing what Hasna said earlier, that we really should be speaking up more. So having groups like the Asian American Commission would be great in giving Asians more voice in America and let them know that, hey, you know, it's like we should treat each other equally. And also, I think what I said earlier about generalization, I think that happens pretty often, where I think when I was first in the States, I feel like Americans would look at Asians as all coming from China. And so there's really no difference between like China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan. Like if you look this, then you must be coming from China. And so if they have that generalization in their mind, then of course they'll associate a particular disease with like all Asian race. But if they're able to see Asians differently, then and they'd be able to see that it's not like even if an American committed a crime, it's not like all Americans are bad. And similarly with the disease also. So be able to be educated and not make generalizations, I think that would solve the issue. But again, it's not something that really can be solved over the next few years, but something that we can work towards too.
What about you, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about race and racism, I really try to talk about it in terms of systems, and I try not to generalize because I think you get really dangerous situations like that. And so I think the biggest problem that we have is we still have systems that explicitly discriminate and are oppressive. I think that, you know, we have to work through that. And so, but the issue is when you talk about systems for a lot of people, they immediately think about it from the lens and viewpoint of their individual life. And so most people are always thinking about, well, how does this impact me? I am not racist. I am not saying the N-word. I am not, you know, going out and saying these things to Asian Americans. But it's the fact that there are systems in place that do discriminate and that do keep systems in power in check. And so I think there's right now a lot of conversations that are being had that people just quite don't understand. And they don't, if you've never heard of redlining before, how are you going to know, right? You don't understand that if you've never heard of what the cliff effect is, you know, when you think about social welfare, the system, all you hear about is the talking points, but if you don't know what the cliff effect is, then you're not going to understand that the way that the social welfare structure is constructed right now is basically, if you make a penny over the poverty line, then you lose all benefits. So basically it is to keep people below the poverty line, and doesn't actually allow you to have upward social mobility. So all those things actually play a role in race, and people don't even know that in New York City, the largest group of racial community that lives in poverty are Asian Americans. Nobody would know that. And so, you know, the amount of, and we have the largest wealth gap, right? So that's why the model minority myth that we're successful is actually disproportionate compared to if you actually just aggregate the data, which there's not enough data right now. As a public policy student, I go through data sets, and oftentimes Asian Americans are completely left out of it. And even when you include Asian Americans, we're so diverse, it is impossible to actually accurately analyze our community and our needs because of the diversity and the complexity of the needs of our community. And so I think, again, it becomes all of what comes back to is representation. And we need to continue to be uncomfortable. And we need to continue to push ourselves to, like, I really loved what Kayla said about traveling. Like, leave your damn community. Like, go hang out with some Black people and some people in the Latinx community. Go hang out with some white people. You know, go sit there and feel like you know, that pit in your stomach when you're uncomfortable and you feel like I don't want to be here. Work through that. You know, be in a place where you speak up. You know, if you've never been to a spoken word, you know, and gone on stage and done it, like you've always wanted to do spoken word, but like you always felt like I couldn't do it. Go fucking do it. You know, go play punk rock. Like, hell yeah. Go jam out and you know, wake up the next morning with your neck stiff because you were banging your head so much. Like, you know, like I think all these things that we want to do and express ourselves, like for me, it comes down to identity. It always comes down to figure out your why. Understand what your why is, to understand, figure out your identity, to then to find your destiny. And I think for Asian Americans, we are on that path right now. And that means that we have to confront the uncomfortable conversations in order for us to even begin to tackle the discrimination that we face. And because if we don't have a collective, cohesive identity that we're like, this is who we are a diverse, beautiful community that has so much to offer if you just let us. And we are not who you box us in as, and we're really going to be able to contribute a lot more to this country. And we're going to be able to break out of some of the old traditional, you know, generational curses that we continue to pass on to each other, right? But like Alex, you talked about mental health. Yes, I went through periods, you know, my mid-20s when I was severely depressed. I still struggle with anxiety. You know, every time a video of mine goes viral on TikTok, I literally just curl up in a ball. I'm like, fuck, what did I do? Like, you know, but yeah, for me, it's just, we need to just keep being uncomfortable, keep growing, keep speaking up, and show everyone what we are capable of.
What about you, Kiki?
I think what Sam said really resonated with me. Having conversations, and uncomfortable conversations is essentially what it is, because we can talk amongst ourselves and have people that will just be an echo chamber of our ideas and thoughts. But I think that getting a perspective of somebody else, almost like a gnarly perspective. Like for me, if somebody posts something political on my Facebook feed that I don't like, I never unfollow them, but I like to keep them on there just to see what the opposing perspective is. And I think that's a healthy way to kind of have a full perspective of what's happening, especially in a situation where you're facing racism and you're a counterpart in it. A lot of people will want to react emotionally and just lash out. But I think it's super, super important to hear people out, hear their story, why they feel that way, and have a really uncomfortable conversation about it. I ended up talking a little bit, like most people are like, why'd you talk to that guy? And I was like, I wanted to know why he thought that I should be upset about the Black Lives Matter movement. And that he has an Asian wife. And I was like, what's your perspective? Probably a mistake, because you can't trust everyone in your inbox, but it was also interesting to see, because he was a relatively sound person. And it just sounded like he was trying to protect his family. Like, he has an Asian wife and an Asian daughter. He's white himself and wanted to just protect Asian people. And that was maybe the way of him connecting to a group that wasn't Caucasian, perhaps, whether it made sense or not. But I think that if you try to have an uncomfortable conversation, at least, well, however much you can take, you don't want to have it too much and then get overwhelmed, but maybe at least once a week, and reach out to somebody who has an opposing view and have a conversation that's sound, that's not aggressive, and that you try to remove your emotion. I like to say it as look at the world as a spaceship. You don't like as an observationalist, rather than getting emotionally invested. And that can help give you perspective on the reason why somebody is acting that way, rather than just having an emotional reaction to what they're saying. I think that can help you develop your own confidence and understanding of the whole topic, not just your own perspective, and change the groups that you hang out with. I mean, it's pretty much what everybody was saying, but I think that's a huge, huge thing, to see more and invest more in an outside perspective. That way you can formulate your ideas about your own community and help educate them about theirs.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to thank you all for coming today and helping me showcase Asian empowerment. Is there any future plans or projects that you have that the audience can look forward to in the future? We can go with Alex first. Is there anything with Ivy Way any future plans that you have?
I don't know. We originally wanted to focus more in Asia because I think we have a lot of Asian students who need to be mentally prepared for when they get to the States. That can be academically, could be mentally, could be getting to know more about the American culture. What we're trying to do for the past couple of years is we're trying to push for a sort of a homeschool program where we have our own curriculum in teaching these Asian students or students in China and Taiwan, and getting them prepared for America. And what we did last year was that we have like a U.S. history course, but instead of just teaching U.S. history by the books, like what schools usually do, our teacher taught them the Constitution. So getting to know how like the origin of America, and I think having programs like that really helps students get to know more about America. And so when they get there and I think learn about the U.S. history as a whole, they're able to understand more and understand American history deeply. I think programs like this would help Asian students get to know and be assimilate into the American culture better. And so like programs like that are what we're trying to push for with these students in Asia.
Sure. Tonight, actually, we do a Real Talk Tuesdays for Hate is a Virus, and we will be having, so I host that every other Tuesday, and we have Tracy Kemi, I will make sure I want to say that right. She's a Japanese American activist. She's badass, amazing, and we'll be having a conversation today. And I think every night at 10 p.m. to about midnight, or sometimes 1 or 2 a.m., I host TikTok lives, and we have uncomfortable conversations. We have, I have a group called well, I didn't create this; they created it themselves. It's called Sam Senate Cabinet (SSC), and it's about 30 strong now, I think. And the president and the two heads, one is a white conservative Trump supporter female, and the other one is a LGBTQ plus identifying Black progressive woman. So, and we have people that from all across the political spectrum tune in and be a part of the conversation. I've had people who are All Lives Matter folks come in and try to troll my conversation. Then at the end of it, they actually came around and said Black Lives Matter. I've dealt, with folks who were telling me that bullying is okay, and then we ended up having a one-on switching over to Instagram so I could see their face. I'm like, all right, you wanna say these things, and put your face on it. Let's do it. Let's debate. Let's have a conversation. So I guess like you know, I really want to elevate what Kiki was saying, and that we need to have these uncomfortable conversations. You shouldn't be cutting people off. But I think part of it is, you know, to do that interpersonal work to grow as a human being, so that you're more empathetic and you're able to understand and listen, have perspective, and to know, when you know who you are, it's a lot easier to have these uncomfortable conversations when people are making these personal attacks on you, because you realize that they're just projecting their hurt onto you as opposed to taking it personally. So, you know, the reason why I bring that point up is that's what I'm trying to show through my TikTok lives, is how do you have these uncomfortable conversations? How do you create an environment and a culture in which is inviting for differences of opinion and personalities? And so, yeah, I guess just that quick plug to my TikTok lives, and then also to the conversation tonight with Hate is a Virus. So,
What about Kyla and Kiki? Do you have any future plans or projects?
We have a project that is maybe not directly related, but we're really excited about. We're launching a new video series. We're really passionate about food and travel, and kind of born out of COVID and not being able to travel, we're doing a series where we're really focusing on one ingredient, and then one ingredient, tracing it back to the farmer or to the fisherman who caught that specific fish or ingredient. But what we've kind of discovered in the researching of this project has been really interesting, is that there's a huge Asian farmer community here in California, which I was not aware of at all. So we'll be covering and featuring some of those farmers, and also that, like, I think 90% of the rice in America is grown in California, which I was also not aware of. Like Cal Rose is produced in California. I always just assumed it came from Japan. So yeah, we're just kind of discovering some ingredients made here or grown here in California, many of them being Asian.
Yeah, we'll definitely look forward to all of your projects. You know, we will be your supporters in all of them. So is there any final thoughts, you know, before we close the panel discussion? Any final thoughts that anybody wants to say? Sam, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. And I think I just want to encourage all the viewers, whether you are part of the AAPI community or whatever community you are part of, that we need to continue to engage in these uncomfortable and difficult conversations. But I also want to encourage people to, you know, look within yourself and really be introspective, and find the inner pains and the traumas that you have, confront them, deal with it, grow, listen to other people, gain perspective, and understand that we need to create a world in which equal opportunity exists, where we're looking at each other as human beings. But that also means that we have to start by having uncomfortable conversations and dealing with the problems that are in front of us before we just kind of don't want to be back here 60 years from now doing the same thing when our grandchildren are marching because we didn't fix the problems when we could have. And so, but I also always want to end on a degree of hope, but also make sure that people understand, you know, and be realistic, that right now we should all be uncomfortable. We should be in a place where we are unsure, because that's the reality of the world. But at the end of the day, that we need to just keep laying one brick on top of each other, and before we know it, we will build the world that we are all seeking to do. So that's kind of my last thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Alex, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to say?
Yeah, so I realized that I think something that all four of us have touched upon are about being more active, having conversations and speaking up. And also I think transparency and become more educated. I think those are the few words that really came up in like all of our answers. But I think those are things that we should really be working towards to overcome, whether it's like stereotype, for I guess fairness in our society, for education. I think those are things that we really should be working towards too.
Kyla and Kiki, do you have anything?
I think just ultimately do something that like off the discomfort. I mean, if you are going on a path that you think is right, but you're not passionate about, don't do it. I think follow your passions, just regardless of what others will think, that your passion will fuel you and drive you to success, regardless if it's a conventional path. I think that it's so important, especially amongst our Asian communities, for them to know that it's okay to pursue that career and put your best foot forward and put all of your energy into it, and you will succeed no matter what other people say. So.
I also feel like in this time where many might have a lot of spare time, it's a great time to educate yourself. There's a lot that's not taught in the history books, and I'm just like mind blown. I've started looking into Native American culture, and there's so much that we erased, yet so much that we can still learn from their cultures. I used to think, oh, why would I want to go explore America? There's no culture here, but there's like Native American culture for centuries. And same thing about what Sam mentioned about internment camps, calling them concentration camps. I've never heard that before, actually, and I think that's very powerful. You should, as an Asian American, know about Asian American history. I happen to know some because I chose Asian American history as a major. I chose it because it was an easy major, but I ended up learning a lot, and I think that's important. And there's just, also we're lucky to have so many amazing documentaries available to us at the tip of our fingertips. That wasn't available to people a generation earlier. So take advantage of this time and just educate yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I would like to thank all of you for coming and, for representing our Asian Empowerment panel. Yeah.
And just a quick plug for the shirt. If you want a Hate is a Virus shirt, go to We Are Uprisers IG. So just quick plug. I don't make any money off of it, but Michelle's amazing. So